All right. How's everyone doing? My name is Nick Hemingway, the Director of Volunteer Services for Lifeline Animal Project. And we're glad to have this kind of special virtual event for you all. I know there's only a couple people on here, but hopefully as we kind of move through this session, we'll have some more people join. So yeah, for those of you who aren't staff on here, for those that are staff, thank you for all that you've done for us, for our animals, for our city. It's been a crazy past month or so, and having fosters step up to help us is a really amazing thing. So a shout out to you all for fostering with us. And volunteering with us for those who have volunteered. So yeah, real quick, as you're seeing these slides go by, a couple of housekeeping items. All the participant mics will be muted. If you do have any questions, please post them in the chat and designate them to everyone so everyone can see them. And then questions will be addressed throughout the kind of topics that Kris is going to go through, if they're relevant to that topic. And then also a little later on, we'll have a second half where there's an open Q&A, and we'll read off those chat questions and have Kris respond. So yes, I'm very, very happy to introduce Kris Hale. She's been a really amazing partner with us, specifically working with our Fulton location. And she has a lot of really amazing experience. She's a CPDTKA certified dog trainer, and she's the owner and founder of, as you see right here, Best in Dog Training. And then not only is that, she's a high school psychology teacher, former foster parent. She's a rescue volunteer, a member of Pet Professional Guild, Association of Professional Dog Trainers. She's actually a certified dog parkour instructor, which I think is pretty cool. So yeah, as I mentioned earlier, Kris has been supporting our fosters and volunteers for a hot second now, providing training tips. So we're very grateful to have Kris doing this virtual experience for everyone. And we hope that those of you who have any questions or any concerns can maybe have some things answered by Kris today. So yeah, without further ado, I'd like to kind of let Kris take this over, and we'll move on throughout the evening. All right. All right. Now let me switch screens here.
Okay. Hi, I'm Kris Hale. Thank you for having me today. I'm excited to be here and answering any questions that you have. A few things have come up that I was going to address right off the bat, and I don't see the screen, so I was going to look at that screen. Oops. Oh, I apologize. I'm not very good at this. So a couple things that I wanted to initially address right off the bat was just answering the question of how dogs learn. And one of me being certified as the certification that I have says that I use positive reinforcement. So it's really important that when you are working with dogs, that you're actually reinforcing the behavior that you want. A lot of times we accidentally reinforce behaviors we don't want, like jumping up. When a dog's jumping up, if you are engaging with that dog, you're giving that dog attention, you're actually teaching that dog that jumping up works and gets what they want. Same thing, a lot of times people complain that the dogs are stealing their shoes. That can be the direct result of when the dog steals your shoes, you chase the dog. Well, as far as the dog is concerned, this is a game. So it's really, really important that you are paying attention to and reinforcing the behavior you want. So when your dog is sitting, when you come in the door, that's when you want to reward the dog. And so it's really important as well that you are looking for what the dog actually is rewarded by. It might be treats, it might be food, it might be affection, it might be praise. Some dogs simply are rewarded by being alone and getting some time by themselves. So really pay attention to what your dog finds to be rewarding. It might be a game of chase. If your dog is trying to engage with you and doing little things to engage and you're not paying attention, you're ignoring the dog, and then it steals a shoe and you go running off and chasing it, as far as the dog is concerned, this is the behavior that's working. So that's just one of the things I wanted to keep in mind as you move forward with working with your dogs is, am I actually rewarding something I don't want to reward? Am I giving in when the dog is barking? If the dog is barking at me, is that when I decide to throw the ball? If I want the dog not to bark for me to throw the ball, then I want to throw the ball when the dog is looking at me or sitting, etc. So I hope that kind of sets the stage for some of the other things that we're going to talk about, such as leash reactivity, crate training, barrier reactivity is another thing that has come up as well. Any questions so far? Okay. So I know two of the things that are on the list are crate training and potty training. I called it housebreaking on the form that I sent out. I did provide and document with crate training and housebreaking if you want to look back at it. For crate training, obviously housebreaking, potty training is going to be a lot easier if you have actually crate trained your dog, because your dog can be confined and then you're going to reward the dog when the dog goes outside. For crate training, you never, ever, ever want to force your dog to go in the crate. Don't grab it, don't push it, don't take it by the collar and put it in the crate. Actually, when you want to set up a crate, put some stuff in the crate that the dog is drawn to, treats, blanket, whatever. And when the dog goes in the crate, just leave the crate door open, reward the dog, let the dog come out. This is a slow process. Make sure that you know, the next time that the dog goes in the crate, then you would maybe shut the crate for just a minute or two, even just a few seconds, open the crate, let the dog out. So you want the crate to be something that the dog actually wants to be in, not something that the dog fears. When you force a dog into a crate, you're creating the crate as a fearful space rather than a safe space. You don't want to use the crate as punishment. And you also don't want to only put your dog in the crate when you're about to leave, because then the dog starts to associate you leaving with the crate. You want to have your dog in the crate on occasion, maybe when you're sitting in your office. In fact, one of my dogs is currently in her crate right now because she just ate. She's comfortable in her crate, and this gives her practice and comfort being in the crate. So again, make the crate comfortable, make it a slow, slow, slow transition. And this can also work towards learning to let your dog be alone, because that's also an issue. And some of these dogs haven't been alone yet because we're on the stay-at-home order. And as soon as you go to work, some of the dogs are going to really experience some separation anxiety or separation and frustration because they're alone for the first time. So I'll come back to that in a second. As for potty training, having a dog that is crate trained makes potty training that much easier. You want to supervise the dog all the time until the dog is potty trained. If you can't supervise, then the dog should be in a crate or in a confinement spot or actually attached to you. You can literally tether the dog to you with just a leash and then take the dog out periodically. Don't wait to have the dog tell you they want to go out. I have clients who want me to teach them how to let the dog ring a bell so the dog will go out when it rings a bell. I do not recommend that, because then you teach your dog to ring a bell all the time because they just want to go outside. You want to teach the dog really to hold it until you're ready to take them out. But that means you're going to have to take your dog out on a regular basis so they can practice holding it. And then when you get the dog outside, you reward, reward, reward. What is the best treat in the world? When they actually get outside, make going to the bathroom outside a rewarding experience. If the dog does go to the bathroom in the house, honestly, I say it's your fault because you weren't supervising the dog. Don't punish the dog for going to the bathroom in your house. Instead, clean it up and then reward the dog for going outside and keep an eye on the dog. Again, you can crate the dog if you are not able to watch the dog. You can attach the dog to you. You can also use a confinement space. X pens are another option for some people, or behind a baby gate in a smaller space, so that the dog learns to use outside rather than in the house. The other thing that you probably want to do is, if the dog does go to the bathroom inside, you want to wipe it down with an enzyme cleaner so it actually reduces the scent. I think the next thing was leash reactivity. Leash reactivity is a big one. I know I've talked to several people on the phone about how to handle leash reactivity. Right now, Blue 9 Pet Products is offering a challenge on Facebook. If you're on Facebook, I posted it in the on the foster page website. There's also a really good website. I think it's Care, which is about reactivity as well. The Blue 9 Pet Product idea is teaching people in stages how to loose leash walk. If you can get a dog to loose leash walk, then leash reactivity is going to be lessened. The Care website goes through the series of steps that you would want to take for leash reactivity. Most leash reactivity is the result of a dog who's afraid. They're on a leash, so it's a fear response. It's a fight or flight response. Their sympathetic nervous system is in overdrive and they can't get away. So they are reacting. They're looking aggressive. They're looking like, they're going to kick somebody's rear end because they are actually afraid, and it's more of a fight response with that. Obviously, some dogs are dog aggressive, but some of these tips can be used as well. So part of this is, for leash reactivity, is watching your dog's body language, knowing when your dog is right below what we call threshold before they go over threshold. So that body language of, I'm alert, my ears are up or straight up, I'm stiff, I'm staring, they're getting reactive. They're not over threshold yet, but they're getting that way. They're elevating. Once they're over threshold, you cannot rationalize. You cannot get them to stop. If you're around teenagers, once a teenager or even a child is having a temper tantrum, you can't rationalize with that person anymore. They're over threshold. So think of your dog in a similar way. They are over that threshold. The only thing you can do at that point is get away as fast as you can. So you want to work up towards building your dog's confidence. You want to work at counter conditioning their reaction when they see another dog in the distance. So again, reward is really important. Once a dog's over threshold, they're not interested in a treat. So play around with treats. What food does your dog find rewarding? Kibble may work. Most times in a high stress situation, their kibble's not going to work. They're going to need the really, really good stuff. So gross organ meat is one of the things that's really, really good. If you're going to use some of that packaged organ, like they have, Stella and Chewy's has it. Several companies carry like lung, heart, liver. If they are, you can try those and see if they work. Make sure you wash your hands. You can try cheese. You can try hot dogs, any of those things. And I just saw a chat that came in. What if my dog is not food motivated? Try seeing if they are food motivated. You might not be using the right food first. Kibble really is not the most motivating thing in the world. The other thing is, if they are over threshold, they're not going to be food motivated. If they're highly stressed, if they're fearful, if they've reached that point where they're actually aggressive, they are not going to be food motivated. But you can also see what else may motivate the dog. Maybe their favorite toy motivates them. Walking is harder. When you're walking, you want to reward quickly. So it is harder to find that reward that will work, because sometimes it's playtime, sometimes it's a toy, sometimes it's affection. You just have to play around and see what does my dog get rewarded by. I did post a video on the foster group page for how to touch. If you can get a strong touch from your dog, when you're going through that process, you're also teaching your dog, you're marking behavior. So you're actually teaching your dog that yes or clicker, if you clicker train, means you did what I wanted you to do. That in and of itself starts to become a reward if the dog has a strong response to that. So you can try and teach your dog touch in this process, and a yes may actually help. One of mine is a squirrel chaser. If she doesn't chase the squirrel and I say yes, and she looks at me, she doesn't necessarily get a treat anymore, but she's looking at me. She's coming back to me because she knows that yes means I did what I was supposed to do. So for leash reactivity, again, body language is super important. You want to keep the dog below threshold. So you're going to work with the dog below threshold. So let's say the dog at 50 feet in the distance, which is quite far, sees another dog and is already alert. You can tell that they're alert. You're not quite over threshold, but at 45 feet, they go crazy. You want to work at that 50-foot mark, okay? And you want to counter condition the dog when they see another dog. So again, this is where positive reinforcement is super, super important. Some of these dogs may have been actually previously used with a shock collar or a choke chain or a prong collar. And what people tend to do with those is when they see another dog, they jerk on that or they shock the dog, and the dog actually now has an association with seeing another dog with pain. So you want to actually get your dog to associate seeing another dog or person or whatever it is that they're reacting to with good. And that's where trying to find what rewards the dog is important. So you're going to work in that sweet spot. You're going to counter condition your dog to look at you. You can use look, you can use touch, you can use focus. Those are some skills. I would not say try and get a dog to sit, because sitting is putting them in a vulnerable position and that may not work at all. And if all else fails, you turn and go the other way. If you see a dog and you know that your dog is not going to be able to work here, go up somebody's driveway and you can do the Pez dispenser way of feeding your dog. Just keep feeding them treats, little tiny treats to keep them engaged and associating this dog at a distance with something good. That is it in a nutshell. It is a long process. Leash reactivity is not an easy fix. It takes a lot of work, and all these things are going to take consistency. The behaviors that stay the strongest are the ones that are rewarded on occasion. So if on occasion I let my dog go crazy and bark at other dogs, if on occasion I let my dog jump on me, if on occasion I let my dog, on the sofa, then the dog is going to work harder to get that, because they know that they're going to get rewarded sometimes. So they're going to try harder to get that behavior or get you to let them do that. The other thing for leash reactivity, just as a general statement, is work on confidence building. If your dog is a confident dog, they're going to be less afraid of the world around them and less reactive to the world around them. You can work on confidence building by teaching them basic skills. Nick said I am a certified parkour trainer as well. There are some skills you can do. Just a dog that has confidence and knows how to do things and is working on things, whether it's jumping over something, going under something, touch, sit, stay, you're working on their confidence. They're going to be more confident in the real world. That's nutshell of leash reactivity. The barrier reactivity is a similar situation. The dog is over threshold. So you want to keep the dog under threshold. I've talked to several people who talk about how their dog runs to the neighbor's fence as soon as they go outside, and they bark, and they can't get them in. Honestly, you can't let the dog do that. If you're letting the dog do that, they're practicing that behavior. And as everybody knows, the more you practice something, the better you get at it. So the more the dog practices fence fighting, is what I call it, or what people typically call it, the better fence fighter they're going to be. So try to avoid letting them fence fight. Meaning you may have to take the dog out on a leash. You may have to work on some of this leash reactivity stuff in the backyard so that they are not actually fighting along the fence. You would also want to work on a strong come command, strong recall, because if your dog has a strong recall, then they're gonna respond to you more so than fence fighting. But if they are really good at fence fighting, if they fight, you're gonna have to have a stronger recall. And so again, reward the recall, reward the behavior of leaving it alone. I'm gonna work on some leave it, and I'll post that on the foster page, hopefully in the next week, and show you kind of how to start with leave it. And then barrier reactivity in a crate. If they're behind a gate, what you can also do is, let's say you've got a foster that when it's in a crate, if somebody walks by, they bark, bark, bark. You can, as you walk by, toss treats. Make somebody actually coming by the crate a good thing rather than a bad thing. So you can toss some treats. Obviously, you're not going to want to let the dog out when they're going crazy, because then that rewards that behavior. And then I think the last topic was teaching the dog to be alone. This is going to be a big one. A lot of the dogs have not been alone yet. So just like with crate training, and you want to combine this with crate training, you're going to want to slowly leave the dog by itself. Leave, for a minute or two, come back. Leave for 5 minutes, come back. Leave for 15 minutes, come back. Even if it's just in another room in the house. Don't let the dog follow you from room to room. Have them stay in a separate room. Again, crate training is going to be the best way to do this. And then do it in small increments so that they start to feel comfortable being alone. When you leave them, I would leave them with something like a Kong or a lick mat. That a Kong or a lick mat would help to distract them. Licking is actually a calming behavior for dogs. So if you can give them something to distract them to make being alone not a big deal, that would be awesome. Keep in mind, a dog though that is frustrated when left alone or starting to show signs potentially of separation anxiety is not going to want that Kong. They're not going to want the lick mat when you aren't home, because they are super anxious and stressed out. And when dogs are anxious and stressed out, they're not going to be hungry and they're not going to want to eat. If a dog is not food motivated, I don't know that you necessarily need to give them the Kong or lick mat in their crate, but you just want to start to let them learn to be alone. Maybe leave them a nylabone, an antler, or something along those lines to chew on to keep themselves occupied. And I hope that answered what you wanted to from the get-go. Nick?
Yeah, no, I think
Okay.
that answers a lot of questions for everyone. We haven't seen a lot of questions come through the chat, but I know a couple people have joined us since starting. So if anyone has any questions that they'd like to ask Kris, please feel free to post them in the group chat to everyone, and then we can start a Q&A.
Does that make sense though, with like leash reactivity and barrier reactivity?
I think it makes sense. Yes, it
Okay.
makes sense to me. I'll let other people respond though, of course.
Okay.
Okay, so we did have Michelle asked, can you address stranger danger a little bit?
So stranger danger is just its reactivity. Are you talking about, Michelle, from a standpoint of reacting when they see a stranger, or are you talking about from the standpoint of hiding? If it's a reactive thing, okay. So stranger danger is reactivity. You're going to want to do the same thing that you would do on a leash with leash reactivity. Slow. Where is the point at which stranger danger is the most explosive? Work below that. Some people think that the best thing to do is to give stranger treats and hand them to the dog. I do not recommend that, because then you're making the dog make a choice of, do I go up to this person that's terrifying to me to get this thing I really want? What I would do instead is, since the dog is already comfortable with you and knows you're feeding the dog treats as you get closer to the person, because what you're doing is trying to counter condition the dog so that the dog is in counter conditioning the dog. Stranger is not scary. Stranger means food or treat or good things, not scary things, but it should start from coming from you. I hope that helps. Okay, awesome. Cats, did I see cats?
Yes. So
Okay.
question, best way to introduce a dog to a cat in the home?
So this is a long process. I would also say that you would want to, if you're concerned about the dogs getting along, you would do the same thing with introducing another dog to the house potentially if the dog is leash reactive. I would, for cats specifically, have the dog in the house in a crate or behind in a totally different room, door shut. You're going to give the dog a Kong. They're going to lick on the Kong. They're going to smell that the cat exists. The cat is going to have an opportunity to smell that the dog exists. This could go on for, day or two, where just so you know that they're comfortable, that these dog exists, cat exists, their smells. You could let the cat, when you take the dog outside, you can let the cat come into the room that the dog was in. When the cat is in a different part of the house and safe, you could have the dog come and smell where the cat has been. So they're smelling each other, they know they exist. And then very, very cautiously and slowly, you would want to do, and I think somebody described it this way in one of the chats I saw, a drive-by. So you would, maybe the dog is behind still in its crate or behind a baby gate. Again, if a dog is barrier reactive, that would not be the way that I would approach it. But then you can let the cat kind of walk by. I would have the dog on a leash initially if you're going to have any interaction at all, so that you can get the dog away from the cat. I would not pick up the cat because obviously if a cat is afraid of a dog, you could be clawed. But then reward the cat as well. If the cat is comfortable and showing that it's comfortable, it smells the dog, it's hanging out outside the door of where the dog usually is, and it's not hissing, but it's looking comfortable, give the cat some treats. Let the cat know that this is the behavior you want from the cat, and just really, really slow integration. You never want to leave the cat and dog alone because obviously you don't want a dangerous situation to occur. And if you have multiple dogs as well, you always want everyone to have some time where they are alone. So with the cat and the dog, you want to make sure that the cat has a safe space to go, that there is separate time, that the cat doesn't have to worry about its place being invaded by the dog all the time. Does that make sense? Good start. More?
Yes, she responds.
Okay.
Awesome. Okay.
Awesome.
And then Mira did post something. Do you have some suggestions for how to help avoid separation anxiety once more people are venturing out and going back to work? I know you touched on that.
Yeah. So separation anxiety, true separation anxiety is a big, it's a tough one. Okay. It's not, if you have a dog with true separation anxiety, I mean, it really, really is a process and counter conditioning that you have to take. And you really have to commit to that dog that you're not going to leave it alone until it's comfortable leaving it alone. So right now is a fantastic time to be working with dogs to teach them to be alone. So again, short increments of time. Make being alone not a scary thing. Make it fine. So it might be that you're just leaving the dog in a separate room. I would always say a crate because the dog is safer in a crate, for a minute, 2 minutes. Then come back in the room, reward the dog when it didn't bark, when it didn't whine, etc. Leave again for a little bit longer. So do it really, really slowly. I think our dogs at this point are really used to us being home. And then when we do go back to work and all of a sudden we're gone for 8 hours, it's going to rock their world. So now is actually the perfect time to start very slowly introducing your dog to being alone and letting them be comfortable with being alone. So if you have a dog with separation anxiety, this is actually the very, very best time to work on that. There is a fantastic book that lays all this out, and I have to find it. I have it on my shelf, but I will have to find it. I'll email Nick and Mira and Michelle and Grace and the title of the book so you can look at it. It is a very comprehensive process on how to slowly do this. But if you have a dog with real separation anxiety, you do need to do it very slowly. If the dog is just frustrated when alone, again, now is a great time to work on that. So I hope that helps.
Awesome. So we did have a little longer post come through from Kim. Kim says, my pup is a senior. I've had him a little over a year. He loves other dogs, but he doesn't have manners, which is off-putting to dogs that he meets. I don't let him interact anymore because when they react, he reacts. Now when he sees another dog while we are walking, he goes bananas, barking and crying. I can most times redirect him with treats I carry, but is there anything else I can do to help curb this behavior? We try to walk at odd times where less people will be out, but that's more difficult during quarantine, of course.
And obviously that also doesn't solve the problem. I know that Michelle and I have talked about this before, that when people have a leash reactive dog, and then their solution is just to walk the dog when no one else is around, then unfortunately what happens is you're not teaching that dog not to be leash reactive. It is a great way to manage that behavior, but if you want to teach your dog how to be able to walk past other dogs, you definitely want to work on that protocol for leash reactivity, which I talked about. That website Care also has the steps. If you're talking about introducing your dog though to other dogs so that he can play, what you could do if he really, really wants to play, I guess my question is can he play well initially, and does he get overexcited and then his play style escalates, or does he just not have manners at all to begin with? Do we know the answer to that? Or are we not trying to let him play at all? Okay. He's excited first and calms down after. Oh, okay. Wow, that's a long time to wait to calm down. Okay. So if it's taking him that long to calm down, yeah, he probably doesn't have really good manners at all. I hate that he doesn't get the opportunity to play, because playing is a really, really important social piece of a dog's life. And he's probably reactive on a leash because more than anything, he's frustrated. He just really, really wants to be with that dog. If you have people in your neighborhood that are comfortable with you doing a parallel walk, I would recommend trying to do a parallel walk with your dog and the dog that he wants to meet on the other side of the street, because you are practicing safe distance, social distancing now anyway. But then when you're walking parallel, he gets to kind of engage. You can start to let them come closer, but again, because we're doing social distancing, you might not want to do that right now anyway. But for now, I guess he can't really play because of social distancing. So I would focus more on the leash reactivity piece. And then if you can engage somebody in your neighborhood to do a parallel walk, it might be a good way for him to interact with another dog and allow him. Walking is a great exercise for dogs next to each other. And then maybe he can get some of that energy out and eventually to be able to engage with another dog playfully without being overexcited. And I don't know if I answered that at all. Okay, good. All right, awesome.
All right. And we do have Michelle. She asked about, do you have any best tips for dealing with resource guarding of toys, food, people with people, and resource guarding of people with other pets?
Okay. Resource guarding is a big one. There is a book, I think it's called Mine, and I'll send that to you as well. It's an easy read, and it kind of goes through the steps of resource guarding. One of the things that you do want to teach a dog is how to drop it or leave it. Obviously, a dog that is a big resource guarder, dropping it and leaving it is probably not going to be enough to stop the resource guarding. This is one of those things where management is going to be key. If you're talking about food, definitely feed the dog separately. I would even say if you have multiple dogs, feed dogs separately, even prepare the food separately so they're not getting escalated in that way. to inhibit or stop some of the resource guarding. The other thing you can do is while the dog is eating, you can walk by and drop some treats, drop something of higher value in its bowl as you walk by, if it's a food garter. So it starts to be more comfortable with people walking by. Be careful though, because if a dog is you don't want to get injured if the dog is a big resource guarder. So management for safety's sake is going to be a major component here. But again, you can walk by, drop a higher value treat while it's eating. If it's guarding people, you can call the dog. If somebody else can call the dog away to get somebody to kind of move. I know, I'm just trying to think. So tips for dealing with pretty. Oh, okay. I'm trying to think of the best way to approach. That's such, resource guarding is such a big issue, and there's such a difference between resource guarding food and resource guarding humans. I don't know that I can answer the resource guarding humans as well. So Michelle, can I get back to you on that? I will. I want to recommend for you though.
And I just want to ask you, was it Mine, A Practical Guide to Resource Guarding in Dogs by Jean Donaldson?
Yes, that is it.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I'll share that.
Yeah, because I mean, resource guarding obviously is a lot of dogs have it, and it varies from intensity. And some resource guarding is really easy to nip in the bud by simply teaching a dog to drop, leave it, or again, giving something of higher value. But when it's super intense and when it's people, that's a lot harder to deal with. So yeah, maybe Michelle, we'll talk about how to address that. But yeah, the book that Mine is a really good book, and I highly recommend that. Awesome. Did I see mouthiness and jumping?
Yes.
Okay.
So let's see. Lost that one. Oh, well, so we did have one earlier about stranger danger, which you kind of touched on.
Okay.
Already. They're saying that he lunges and barks and will try to bite when new people approach him. Do you have any advice?
Yeah, so that is reactivity as well. It's important to stay under threshold. Don't let for now the dog to get close enough to where he's lunging and biting and all that, because that behavior, and there is a hierarchy of dog-like behavior and what leads to a bite. You want to look for the behavior below that. So the scrunching down, the ears back, the whale eye, and you want to work with the dog before they're over threshold. Once they're over threshold, you can't. So look for the point at which the dog is not lunging and barking, but where they are alert, and try counter conditioning the dog, work with the dog there, use what's rewarding for the dog. Again, it may have to be super high value treats because that is a reactivity thing. Keep the distance that your dog is comfortable with as you're working with the dog. If all else fails, again, turn and go the other way, go up somebody's driveway to keep your distance. Because again, the more that your dog practices lunging and barking and biting at strangers, the better they get at it. So there is an element of managing that space at the same time that you are working to counter condition that space.
Awesome. And you were right. There is a question about mouthiness and jumping. Becca asks, tips for dealing with pretty severe mouthiness and jumping.
Okay. Well, first, yeah, there's definitely dogs that have very severe mouthiness and jumping. Some of that is energy levels. Some of that is they didn't learn how to play correctly to begin with. You definitely want to have an outlet for the dog as far as exercise and mental stimulation to help alleviate some of that. If the dog has enough, if the dog is getting exercise, is getting mental stimulation, some of the mouthiness and jumping should lessen. And then part of it is it's an attention seeking behavior. I mean, kind of look at what is their goal. If their goal in jumping and mouthing this is to get your attention, I recommend turning your back to the dog and not interacting with the dog at all until the dog, all 4 feet hit the ground. Now, if it's a very severe jumping mouthiness, a lot of times the dog is just going to keep jumping at your back. So you have to make sure that you're safe. The other thing that you can always have too for a dog that is very, very mouthy is have a tennis ball, a toy, or something that the dog can put in its mouth instead of you. And then work with the dog on sit, touch, focus, something along those lines so the dog can start to learn some impulse control, because jumping and mouthiness, a lot of that is an impulse control issue. So the more that you're working with the dog to keeping it active, keeping it mentally engaged, working on some skills that are impulse control, you should start to see some of that lesson, but really make sure that you are not rewarding jumping and mouthiness. I wouldn't engage with the dog at all. But as soon as the dog has all 4 feet on the ground, that is when I would say you would engage with the dog, whether it is attention or treat or whatnot, or playing, throwing the ball, etc.
Great. Okay. We did have another question come in immediately as you finished. So Sarah has a question. She's asking, what are your thoughts on using a muzzle on a dog that is still learning to play with others, and the handler is just not sure if the dog is going to be okay with other dogs?
Muzzles are great.
Yeah.
I would use a basket muzzle, but muzzles are a fantastic tool. In fact, for your mouthy dog, you could muzzle it if it's mouthing that much. But basket muzzles are great. You definitely need to teach your dog to wear a muzzle though. If the dog already knows how to wear a muzzle, absolutely, I would use a muzzle.
Nice. All right. Oh, here we go. Michelle's asking, would you be able to do a video for us on muzzle conditioning?
I will have to find one. I don't have a muzzle. One of my dogs has to be muzzled at the vet, but I don't have a muzzle. They muzzle her. I know there's videos out there. It's really what you would do is take the muzzle. Again, I would use a basket muzzle. You would put treats in the muzzle. Make sure that the dog, is comfortable with the muzzle. Then you're rewarding the dog when the muzzle's up on their face. You're giving her rewards. Two of my dogs I've never muzzled, but one of my dogs, she does have to get muzzled, but I never had to condition her to be muzzled. And somebody just said there's a 1-minute muzzle conditioning video. That's fantastic. Awesome. Thank you.
I'll actually look for that link and share it here while we're waiting for another question to come.
And I don't know if you want to look for the separation anxiety book, but there is a separation anxiety book. I forget her name. But I'll look. I'll email it to you if you don't see it. Did another question come in? I felt like I just saw something.
Yes. So Whitney has a question. How would you tailor recommendations for dogs that aren't treat motivated?
Aha. So we kind of talked a little bit about this already. First of all, I would see if you can find a food that motivates the dog, because it's a lot easier to train a dog using treats than really anything else, because you can give a treat so quickly. So I would don't just try your run-of-the-mill treats. You might need to try, like I was saying before, some of the organ meats. They're like Stella and Chewy's uses organ meats. There's lots of brands that have like lung and heart and it's gross. So make sure you wash your hands. But you could also try cheese. You can try peanut butter. I would rule out all food first. When a dog is over threshold, they're not going to be food motivated. Even the most food motivated dogs in the world, if they are super stressed out, are not going to want to eat. So again, you're going to want to work with the dog below threshold so that they are still food motivated. And I would start to, if you don't clicker train and you don't know how to clicker train, I know there's plenty of videos out there to how to click train. but you can also use a marker of yes. In the video that I showed with touch, it's literally you're saying yes. That in and of itself eventually does become the reward. The other thing is to start playing around to see what the dog finds rewarding. It might be affection, it might be a particular toy, it might be time alone. The dog may simply be motivated by praise, but if you having a dog that is food motivated is much, much, much easier to train than a dog that you have to try and figure out what the other motivating factor is. I've worked with clients before that have told me their dog is not food motivated, but we have found something that the dog finds rewarding. And again, it's super easy to train with a treat. You make them super tiny and it's a quick, fast reward. If you're using a toy or affection, the it's not an immediate reward. Oh, no worries. I'm glad you joined us.
And I did post Michael Shikashio's muzzle acclimation video link right there.
Awesome. Thank you.
People to look at. All right. Well, we still have a couple more minutes. If anyone else has any questions that they'd like to ask Kris. Okay. So Jamie is asking issues with meeting new persons.
Is it a reactive issue or is it like a fear hiding issue?
Reactive.
Okay. So, I mean, it would be the same thing that with leash reactivity. Anytime the dog is reactive, a lot of times, again, it is a fear response. Obviously, some dogs, it's an aggressive response, but if it's a fear response, a lot of it is building the dog's confidence, making them comfortable with people. And like I said a few minutes ago, I would not have that person try and give them treats, but instead you're giving them treats. You want them to associate people with good things. And again, it's about keeping them under threshold and at a distance until the dog is comfortable and really counter conditioning them. And so again, that website, I think it's Care. I think you posted it, Nick. That is a great website. It is, if you follow that protocol, that is going to help with like any of the reactivity you're dealing with, because you're counter conditioning the dog to not have that reactive response, whether it's on a leash, a barrier, or whatnot.
All right. And Grace actually just submitted another question. Oh, well, so sorry, we'll touch back on Grace in a second.
Okay.
Jamie did ask, do you wait for the dog wanting to interact with a person?
I mean, I'm a firm believer that you have to give the dog choice. If you force the dog to do something it doesn't want to do, you're risking, I mean, it could be reactive. And especially with the dogs that we're talking about, we don't know what their background is. We don't know if they were socialized. We don't know if they had a horrible experience with somebody that looked like this person. So I always, to be safe, let that dog make a choice. Don't force a dog to meet somebody. And again, if the dog is comfortable with you and will take a reward from you, and I know I keep saying treats, but it's because then I would give the treat. I would give the treat. I wouldn't have somebody else give the treat, because if you have somebody else give the treat, you're forcing the dog to interact and they may not be comfortable. But if they start to show interest and they are starting to be comfortable, by all means, let them interact with that person. But I would never force a dog to do that.
We did have another question to kind of bounce off of that. Becca is asking, what are appropriate doggy signals for wanting to interact? For instance, sniffing may not equate to being wanting to be touched.
Sniffing is usually a like sniffing can be a behavior that is, I'm uncomfortable. For example, one of my dogs, she's afraid of cars. So whenever we're on a walk, if a car goes by, I notice that she starts sniffing really intently on the ground wherever we are. That is a signal that she's uncomfortable with the car. So sniffing is a low level, is one of the lower, I'm uncomfortable, this is a distracting thing, I don't want to interact. The signs that the dog wants to interact is obviously that full wiggly butt is obviously a clear one. This wag, stiff wag, is not, I'm in a happy place. That stiff wag is actually a sign of arousal. It can be a good sign. It can also be a bad sign. So it's not necessarily I want to interact with you, but really look for the dog to have like an open mouth, loose face. If their ears are back, if their mouth is tight, if they're crunched down like that, those are signs that the dog that the dog is not interested in interacting. Did that answer your question, Becca? Okay.
Awesome.
Good.
So we'll go back to Grace's question. Grace asked, is there any training you can do to prepare a dog for their rest period after heartworm injections?
So what I honestly recommend, and I would check, that's a great question. I would check with the vet, but you still, because obviously the dog is on rest. Rest can be pretty intense, especially if you have a dog that has a lot of energy and it's a young dog. So I would look for enrichment activities that the dog can do that's not going to get their heart elevated. Sniffing activities can be a great source. There's snuffle mats. You can just take a towel and throw treats in a towel, toss it on the ground. I know you all have been making the toilet paper roll, paper towel roll treat things. Any kind of sniffing activity, puzzle toys, mental activities can be a great way to get the dog to use their mind so that but their heart rate isn't elevated, so they are resting. I would still check with a vet to make sure. And you could also even try some simple, like you can do some basic skills. You could do touch, you could do sit, you can do down. I would, again, check with the vet to make sure that the dog is able to do those things. But if you're engaging with the dog and working with the dog on that level, that may help them to rest, not get their heart rate up, but still keep them mentally engaged. My experience is some of the dogs that are hyper, you can do a mental thing with them and that will wear them out really fast because it's almost like the running and the hyper play actually can it's like they build stamina for it. But if you can take a hyper dog and really get them to focus on a mental thing, it may tire them out. And I know for our heartworm positive dogs that are going through treatment, that might be helpful. Is that where, does that help? Awesome.
All right.
Thank you, Michelle.
Anyone? Yeah.
Thank you. I'm glad I can help.
And I will actually share a couple things in the chat. We do have a folder of some resources on a Google Drive for lifelong fosters. So that is there. And then I did want to mention briefly, of course, some of you probably already heard, but Petco Foundation is hosting a lot of different events, virtual events for fosters. And so that can be found at the link I just added there. Comes out a little weird if no one posts after or in between. And then lastly, I did want to mention, so Kris did start a Facebook group. And I don't know if you'd want to kind of briefly talk about that, Kris, or.
Okay. I know Becca's on it. I think Jamie's on it. And I know Michelle's on it as well. If anybody else wants to join, just send me an invite. I do ask that we stay with positive reinforcement and not punishment. But I'm trying to figure out, I'm new to the Facebook group thing. So I'm trying to figure out the best way to organize it. What I've done is put some units up. So we have a unit that just has some general stuff, and I posted, I think, the documents that Nick has shared on decompression, multi-dog household, housebreaking, I don't know why I called it that, crate training, and then I made a unit on enrichment. I've made a unit on basic skills. I want to do parkour, but that's not what everybody else wants to do, so we'll hold off on that. And then I have kind of, if you guys want to post questions about like behavioral concerns, we can start to address that as well. Today I posted a smell thing under enrichment. I do want to highlight the importance of enrichment. Enrichment really, really, really can help address some of the behavioral concerns because it gives your dog an outlet. For example, some people complain that their dog digs all the time. Make a sandbox, put toys in it that your dog is allowed to dig in there, and that can help with digging. Another thing with the jumping, and Becca, I know you've done this with the dogs, you've done some agility stuff. If you're teaching your dog to use, it's a natural jumper. If you're teaching your dog to jump and use that, then hopefully you'll see less jumping to get attention. And then I'm also put some basic skills, and I'll kind of post things as they come up. I don't want to inundate people, but I want to keep people engaged if you're interested in keeping engaged with it. And I did a touch video today because touch to me is a really great foundational skill. It helps you to mark behavior. It also is one of those things that if your dog has a strong touch command, if you're out on a walk and you see the squirrel before the dog sees the squirrel, you can say touch, dog nose goes right to your hand immediately, and it breaks that cycle. Same thing, you see a person coming with another dog, you tell your dog to touch, it kind of breaks that intensity, that stare, that cycle when you do touch. So I'm gonna be posting more enrichment ideas, and I want people to share their own stuff that they do for enrichment so we can work with each other and support one another, and some basic skills and videos on how to teach basic skills. And then I want people to ask this kind of stuff for behavior, and I'll, respond. But, Michelle's on there. I have a few friends that are also trainers that are on there. So my hope is that between all of us, we can support one another and really help one another, help these dogs find homes and change some of the behaviors that are causing, some of the problems that you all are having. So that's my goal.
All right, well, if there's no other questions, I guess we can kind of close out the meeting. Give a couple minutes, but thank you so much, Kris. This has been really great.
Awesome, you're welcome. I really enjoy doing this, so thank you. I'm glad.
And I think everyone on here, and maybe some people that didn't get to make it, would potentially love to do this again sometime if you have some free time.
Yeah, I have lots of time. I'm a teacher, so during the week I actually have to, I'm actually teaching online, which is a shift. But yeah, I would definitely like to help in the future. So if you want to set something up again in the future, definitely let me know.
Definitely. Okay.
All right. Awesome. Thanks,
right.
everybody. I really appreciate your time.
Thanks, everyone, for joining.
Thank you. All right.
Good night.
Bye.